Sachin.
Hey, Dinkar, how are you doing?
Good. And I want to start with a very interesting news.
Okay.
So it's probably reflective of the uh, growth of this podcast, so as to say, and the interest that we keep on receiving on it. So now we are genuinely a podcast. Till today, we were a YouTube channel. But now we are a podcast, and it's available on Apple Podcast. It's available on Google Podcast. It's available on iHeart, which is home of Stuff You Should Know. And it's of course available on Spotify also. So essentially what I did was I took a service. You upload the audio there, and then they publish it to all the popular podcast services. So that made life very easy.
Absolutely. Congratulations to all of us.
Yeah.
And whatever small community we are nurturing about this, it's just fantastic. So excited to be here. In the same vein, there is also a new news about EEBO.org. The site is EEBO.org. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to also talk about that site in this particular podcast. We have been talking about engineering excellence. We have been talking about business outcomes and the linkage between them. But now, finally, a site where people can consume it online, offline, and read about it. So it is a fantastic thing. And this is like all you did. You published it, which was fantastic. Thank you so much. But would you like to talk about EEBO? And I know you also spoke to some external audience about this. So how did it came about? Where do you think this is going with it? And let's try to unpack it a little bit.
Right. So, EEBO, as the acronym suggests, engineering excellence to business outcomes. These are a set of metrics that not only give you a very good idea of where your engineering excellence, where you are on your journey to engineering excellence, but also give you an idea that how are they correlating to the outcomes, the business outcomes, right? And it kind of creates a line of sight. We have in our jobs, we do talk about this a lot. We talk a lot about this to our clients. We talk a lot about this in our, within our organization. But I wanted to share it kind of beyond. So we kind of, this became the house for sharing that knowledge. And I have been sharing over LinkedIn bits and pieces about the concept of EEBO Metrics, and I think it's kind of come together. And let me quickly start talking about it, right?
So just to interrupt, for the people who are only listening to this podcast, the site is eebo.org, eebo.org. Yeah, continue, Dinkar, please.
You're doing a great job of keeping our new podcast audience in mind. I keep forgetting we're no longer just a YouTube channel, right? So we
Absolutely.
need to, So engineering excellence is a very important goal for any head of technology, be it VP of engineering, anyone who's responsible for outcomes of that engineering team, the IT organization, right? Now, what happens is that if you're focusing on something and you want to improve the capability of your team, all this implies is that you will need to invest. You will need to invest in the team. You will need to invest in certain tools and everything, right? So in order to talk about the investment, right, everyone who's funding something wants to know what is the ROI. And what is the outcome out of it? What is the business outcome out of this investment, right? And that is where I think these EEBO metrics come into picture. There's a great analogy, right? You may be having the best car. You may be on the best highway. You may have the best fuel, and you're all fresh and you're just speeding towards your destination. but you could be going, instead of going from Bangalore to Mysore, you could actually be driving from Bangalore to Chikmagalur, right? How do you know? And that's where having that clarity, that what is the outcome, what is that destination I'm driving towards, becomes very important. And we have seen this, Sachin, in so many cases, that people are investing in certain aspect of engineering excellence without ever stepping back and analyzing that, is this, all this investment and effort, does it really lead to an important outcome or not? So it's very important to not only just focus on the excellence, but also juxtaposition that with the outcome. So it's very clear that you know where you're going, where your destination is, and how far you have reached there. So with that in mind, that is the difference between EEBO metrics and any other metrics that people refer to. And the reason I've, you give something a label, you give something a name, if it, if it's like a product, it has some constituents, it has a purpose, and it brings value to something. So what we have done is, there are certain metrics around which we have drawn dotted lines. There's a certain layout, if you may allow me to say that, of these metrics. We have created a dotted line around it. So these are some very opinionated items that we have listed, and that's why we're calling them EEBO metrics rather than, hey, use metric A, B, C, D, and 4K metrics.
Fantastic. So Dinkar, I have seen a lot of metrics, and people typically have only few, but we have been talking about this as a philosophy.
Right.
And the closest example is 4Q metrics. It is 4 metrics, right? The law of small numbers also is in favor of such small metrics. Do you think by making an acronym, we are making it difficult for people to understand?
So that's a very interesting question. I don't know, if it sticks, it sticks. If it doesn't stick, we'll rename, it's a simple Linux command, MV EEBO to something new, right? The idea is, 4K metric for me is a label. Like 4 is kind of important component there. All right. We could have done 11K metrics. We could have done something else. But I think what the key message there was that these 4 are your key metrics. And in our case, what the key message is that these are engineering excellence to business outcome. That is a, number of metrics does not matter. Is it engineering? Is it business? Does not matter. The name kind of encapsulates that engineering excellence to business outcome, right?
So
let's see how it does, right?
Yeah,
so
that's a very good point.
I do want to call out certain benefits of this approach, having a limited set of metrics that are giving you a line of sight from engineering excellence to business outcome. So one thing, the first one that I kind of alluded at is that EEBO metrics act as a very clear value articulation of the benefit of engineering excellence, right? Engineering excellence does result in better business outcomes. It does result in better product. What EEBO metrics can do is create evidence of that and make it very simple for someone to say, as my engineering team were performing better, the business was benefiting. That's one advantage of this kind of approach, right? The other thing is, they provide guardrails for long-running programs by acting as a fitness metric. This phrase fitness metric, I'm kind of borrowing from the book by Rebecca Parsons, who is CTO of ThoughtWorks, Neil Ford, luminary at ThoughtWorks. They kind of came up with this fitness functions, right? The whole idea was that you write these fitness functions which keep on testing an algorithm over a period of time. It kind of ensures that the algorithm still delivers the outcome it was expected. And what we're saying here is, once you have said that in my program, I want this kind of excellence, I want this kind of output. Many times what happens is, in the beginning, the people who envisioned it, the people who were the driving force, they're part of the program, but people move out. new people come in large organizations. It happens a little more frequently. And many times the vision goes with them. And what is left is a long list of tasks to be done, RAG statuses to be shown, governance to be done. The vision goes away. The parameters of success kind of dissipate. What these kind of metrics can do is they can provide that guardrail that you are on track to that vision. You're on track on that promise of excellence and delivery of that business outcome. And third one is, many times for a developer who may not be that up and up with all the business updates, and many times, those information don't also percolate within the gossip channels of the organization. It gives each member a clarity, right? Every developer, that if I check in this code, if this is my lead time, if this is the code that I'm writing has this kind of a security baked in, how does it actually go and deliver that final benefit in form of the product's revenue or the benefit to the organization? It makes it very clear for every participant that what is the value they are bringing into this game. I think this approach brings these very important benefits.
Brilliant. Yeah.
The next one I want to talk about is how to use them, right? So, it's very important, given that they are limited in number, given that they are giving you an idea about the excellence of your team. The first thing that I mentioned also was that your EEBO metrics should say that you have left Bangalore, you have to go towards Mysore, not Chikmagalur, or vice versa. I prefer going towards mountains. So if somehow you're going in the opposite direction, it helps you identify misalignment with those outcomes. That's a very important reason to use them. The other is to use them as information radiators. What that means is that let the whole team know, right? And this becomes very important in today's hybrid scenario. One of our colleagues is writing a book on it. The whole hybrid scenario where people are at different locations, distributed scenarios. People are in different locations. They're looking at screens at different times, right? They have different kind of form factor of screens they're using, right? So the traditional way of putting up a large TV screen in the office is not going to work all the time, right? So you have this dashboard which is available to every team member, and it can act as an information radiator that, this is where we are on our journey to excellence, and this is how it is helping with the business outcomes. I think these are two very important ways to use these. And the moment I talk about usage, I also worry about certain anti-patterns, how people may end up using it. And I hope that it's not used in for that, right? One of my nightmares is that a metric, a little digression. Whenever I talk to a client or someone who's asking me for suggestions about metrics, the first thing I start doing with them is start calculating the cost of each metric. Hey, this metric, sure, maybe we'll need a couple of people for some metrics, need some calculation, they need some algorithm. Sometimes it will take them one sprint, sometimes it will take them one day, sounds fair. Then you will use this tool, this will have an infra cost, then it will have to be maintained and over a period of time. So everything has a cost. And what the first thing I do with that person is figure out the cost of each metric. And then I say, okay, now every time you come and ask this, remember that this is not just a cost on today, it's a continuous cost that you have now incurring. So be very careful about, can I have this metric? Can I have that metric? Can we do this? Can we add that, right? And, and that kind of leads to a large set of metrics. But before that, the one which is kind of highlighted on the screen also is, don't use these metrics to do drill downs and go into specific scenarios or look for that specific person who screwed up or that, bottlenecks. It's not meant for those. There are different tools to figure out those scenarios and bottlenecks. It's never useful to blame anyone. Use EEBO metrics to figure out, oh my God, we are misaligned somewhere, some excellence metric is not working very well. Let me go to that specific tool or that specific flow or that specific team and try to understand what went wrong. These metrics are not for slicing and dicing. The other thing that I was kind of mentioning earlier also is, many times what happens is, as in a large program, right? What I've noticed is that in some way, Sachin, it starts reflecting the Conway's law. So
Correct.
Conway's law traditionally says that the product you design or the way you are building product slowly starts resembling how your organization is structured. Because what happens is, we have a team for engineering, we have a team for QA, we have a team for DevOps, we have a team for this, we have a team for that. So the team, then DevOps team becomes something else. And suddenly the way you are organized, the way your product is organized starts reflecting that, right? And the reason for that is that in large organizations, you have to create departments. But the flip side is that your product and your ways of working now have these artificial bubbles inside them, and in worst case leading to silos, right? And that's why cross-functional team as a concept became so popular. My worry is that metrics are also kind of falling. For team B, these are 5 metrics. Team C, your DevOps team, these are your 4K metrics. Engineering team, these are your metrics. QA team, these are how many bugs you have found. And this team, and suddenly you're looking at all of so many metrics, and what happens logically is people start looking at reds. Okay, let me focus on the red. And suddenly what happens is that whole team management becomes a crisis management, and you're just focusing on fixing what is red. You don't think about why is something green. Maybe something is green today, maybe it will go red tomorrow if you don't focus on everything, right? That's why having so many metrics, so many things does not work. So anti-patterns, EEBO metrics being used for slicing and dicing, don't do that. Second anti-pattern, EEBO metrics scheme becoming larger and larger set just to reflect your teams and components. Don't do that. These are very big anti-patterns. Now,
so one thing to add there, Dinkar, is also which is not highlighted into these slides, but our human nature of whenever we put something out that is visible, and that creates psychological insecurity in people's mind. In terms of it's like a lot of people do not want to post their performance numbers outside because they feel that some people will judge and then make an opinion about that. And I'm not saying everybody, but there is a small portion of people I have seen that they don't feel comfortable to put out some numbers unless it puts their team in good light, rather than being honest about their numbers. I can give an example is that with EEBO Metrics, we were talking about a team, and they had nothing to measure except one metric. And they were very hesitant to put this on. They're like, it's not even worth putting that out. And my point to them was, this one metric which will go out is also indication that you can't measure 6 other metrics which we decided. And that itself is a progress where you are standing today. Your inability as team to measure these 6 other metrics. And if you be honest, you will go and fix those steps to make those metrics visible and then go from there. And my one anti-pattern which I would like to highlight and which is not broadly touched upon here is be very honest with these metrics. The goal is you touched upon into one part, which is like every team member knows what is the reality, right?
Right.
If they are aware of reality and they are honest with them, the whole team can actually make wonders. So the anti-pattern is anything is fine. Just start somewhere, go about it. Even if it is one metric, that's good enough. Many times we are only thinking about, but team wants to do multiple metrics, like 20 metrics. No, if they can't do 20, forget about it. they can do one, let's start with it, and then gradually keep thinking about what is the cost of a metric, and then is it worth for us to add here.
Agreed. Yeah. And now, so if you look at such metrics, what are these characteristics that can help us identify what are good EEBO metrics? So one thing we were thinking is, as we were coming up with what are those specific metrics we should put a dotted line around and say that, hey, these are the EEBO metrics that we recommend. One of the biggest worry was that, there's this thing, the moment metric becomes your target, it stops reflecting the outcome, and it kind of creates a myopia towards that, right? So we should pick up a metric that cannot be gamed, right? Is not easy for someone to go and start tweaking and say that, hey, look, everything is okay, and use that metric to showcase that everything is okay, but in the background 15 other things may not be okay. So one thing that we ensured was that these metrics should be multivariate, means they are derived from multiple metrics, right? They represent culmination of multiple metrics. What that does is that in order for these EEBO metrics to perform better, that means so many other metrics and things have to fall into place. Only then these metrics will perform better. That ensures that there is a holisticness to each metric, and it's very difficult to game them.
Absolutely.
And
Dinkar,
you have some experience here. Yeah.
I know you used to call the word, which I searched actually offline, but the vanity metric is not used here. I think the first point he articulated into complex words, but essentially your metrics can't be vanity metrics. So make sure that these metrics are going to stand the test of time. And if you want to explain these metrics, they are difficult to game and they actually denote value. If that goes up, it should actually impact you positively.
Agree. Yeah. So the next thing what we thought was that these metrics have to be little meta in nature, means they should measure something which is about the flow of the program, ways of working, the way the product works, right? It shouldn't be how many sales have happened, because that is not meta. It could well be that how many times was the flow in the sales process getting blocked because of various reasons, right? Non-availability of something, someone not knowing what to do, some component not being available, right? So it has to be a little meta in nature. And finally, it shouldn't be something that requires a PhD or requires a manual to understand. They should be very easily understood by everyone who is going to look at it and whose contributions will ultimately contribute to this. So when we looked at these things, right, what are the benefits we expect, how we want it to be used, how we don't want it to be used, what are the characteristics, and Sachin, we kind of a structure emerged, right? And I would request you to talk a bit about this structure, as the first instant of this was captured by you.
Absolutely. So for people who are not listening to this, not viewing to this and listening to this, I'm trying to show a diagram where from left to right, I show the journey of metrics into 3 categories. And these 3 categories are excellence in software development, excellence in deployment into production, and progress towards desired business outcomes. And how I came about all of this is essentially, all my life, I have seen we tracking only engineering metrics or excellence in software development metric. And there are about 50 of them. There are various tools, there are code coverage tools, there are CI/CD pipelines, there are tools like SonarQube, and we do not have any shortage of number of metrics which you can create based on a code base. And add that to GitHub and you get insights into how many lines of commit, what is average size of commit, how many commits happened last week, who made how many commits, and all sorts of volumetric metrics, which give you a false sense of security that somebody is actually delivering value. Now, the second bucket is excellence into deployment into production. And there is a dotted line where all these 4 key metrics sit: the deployment frequency, mean time to restore, change fill percentage, lead time, because these come into life only when something is in production. If it is not in production, these metrics are very um, non-indicative of what is reality. So if you add these metrics, the middle part, they give you real cool value into giving the software delivery performance of your system. So think about how fast you are getting software into production and how stable it is, how performant it is, that type of numbers. But yet, combining engineering excellence and even excellence into software deployment to production, it is not indicating whether it met the customer demands. You may be great on software development metric. Your test coverage is great. You are actually small batches, and then commits are great. Your ranking in SonarQube is really nice. All of that is fantastic. You are deploying fast enough to production. Mean time to restore is great. It is a very stable system, and your lead time is low. Your team is cranking out features and putting it to production. But none of these metrics indicate whether you are reaching to the ultimate goal of why you commissioned this program, which is the business outcome. I want to sell more software, or I want to reduce the amount of time required for people to book something. And these are what we are calling business outcome metrics. And this is the third bucket, which is about progress towards desired business outcomes. And we are interested in looking at all these 3 buckets. Do not focus on only one bucket and feel good about it, but you need to plot this picture in a holistic manner and then have this access to all engineering teams, product teams, so that they can contextualize this and ask questions to each other, hold a dialogue. So the structure of EEBO metric is, in a nutshell, 3 buckets of excellence in software development, excellence in deployment into production, and progress towards desired business outcomes.
Right. So when we step back and looked at this layout, so on one hand side, there are these metrics which reflect your engineering excellence. On the other hand, are metrics that reflect your journey towards desired business outcome, and in the middle are metrics which reflect production deployment excellence. Right. There's one thing we realized that while coming up with EEBO metrics for business outcome, given that the variety of business models, it was very difficult to recommend specific metrics. But what we realized was that it was, on other hand, it was possible to recommend categories of those metrics, and we'll touch upon them. So what we want to add here is that for this, have some metric for this kind of category of business outcome metrics, have some metric. Now that exact metric may differ based on your business model, your business domain, so on and so forth, but each of the 4 categories should be covered. So we've been talking about EEBO metrics, and we have been talking about their characteristics, how they evolved. So let's go deep into what are these exact metrics. So in the center, connecting engineering excellence and business outcome is taking software to production and keeping it available for business. And this, I think, the 4 key metrics that Dora came up with are an excellent set of metrics to represent that phase. On the engineering excellence, build failure rate, security warnings, and tech debt are 3 key metrics that we should follow. Sachin, do you want to talk a little bit about each one of them?
Sure. So earlier as well, I touched upon, so I'll be brief here. In terms of 3 key metrics of engineering excellence, we, as I mentioned earlier, there are 50 of them, which you can possibly count. But we internally created a 2x2 grid, and we said, what is the value on y-axis, which it indicates to the end users. And we are coming from a consulting company, so our customer. But in every organization, every engineering company, every engineering team, they have a sort of customer. So you need to think about that. And the second axis was basically the metrics complexity. And what we try to find out is which are the most valuable metric which business care about, and it is also less complex. And what came about is 3 key excellence metrics. And these are build failure rate, security warnings, and technical debt. I'll start with the simplest one, technical debt. Now, thankfully, everybody, including even chief product officers who were earlier, first of all, earlier chief product officer role didn't used to exist. But even non-technical people.
I have a future in the industry. Yeah.
You do have.
Yeah.
So even non-technical people are now aware of what is the impact of technical debt, why technical debt is bad. So we want to count it. And there are thankfully a lot of tools available which can plug themselves into development workflows itself, and then they can count it. Second is security warnings, where you can use various static analysis tools to figure out what are the security warnings before it goes to even integration environments. And build failure rate, we recommend counting that into development environment so that you can figure out how frequently is build failing. Now, for some people, they might think why you care about it. And the reason why we care about it is if your team is actually sitting on a failure build and committing code, and it is triggering another your CI/CD pipeline loop, that means they are not attending to the build failures in time. And this is a discipline indicator, not indicator of quality, but how disciplined is your team. The middle portion is 4 key metrics of production. I would not talk a lot about this, but these are very well-known DORA metrics. I believe everybody has read about them. If not, I highly recommend that. And the last one is 4 key categories of business outcomes. And these are basically broad level of categories which we have observed in our experience. These are either improvement in efficiency or effectiveness, improvement in experience, increase in influence, and future sensing. These 4 categories you can like put on top and start listing for your business which metric indicate one of these. And if there is a 5th category which we haven't covered, you can add that too. The broad guidelines apply, as Dinkar was earlier mentioning, is do not go crazy about putting 200 metrics here. If you do 200, that's great, but put a ruthless like 2x2 grid, which indicates effort or cost and complexity or value, and then try to figure out which ones are the most valuable value indicators for you, and then go about it.
And we have done one podcast in the past. I don't remember the number. I'll probably link it in the description, where we have done a detailed deep dive into each. So when adopting each of these metrics, definitely there are sensible defaults that one should follow. And we've listed certain sensible defaults, right? The first thing is, for each metric, it's very important to have a baseline. Now, the baseline, if you are a transformation program, the baseline is what is the metric doing today. So it's very important to measure it if you were not measuring it. Or you could measure against your industry, right? In our industry, for the product that we're building, this is the baseline that exists. And it's very important to know that baseline. So if you're below that baseline, the first goal is to achieve that baseline and then to excel. And if you're somewhere around it, then it's important to excel to it. That's the first sensible default for using EEBO metrics, is figure out what are the baselines, right? The second thing is have a very clear idea about what the success criteria is. What is the target that I'm achieving, right? It's very important to know that. And on the flip side, and this is something that people don't do naturally, is to figure out, call out what is that failure threshold, where I will say things have gone wrong beyond repair. I either need to pivot or I need to terminate. And this is that singular place where startup building a same product versus an enterprise building a same product can make a difference. The
Yeah.
way startups hands down beat enterprises in creating new products and growing fast is because they are ruthlessly looking at failure thresholds. They're pivoting ruthlessly. They're even terminating things ruthlessly. Wherein in enterprise, it becomes very difficult, becomes very political a conversation. And there's that sunk cost fallacy. Let me put some money, more money into it and see if I can fix it, right? So if you have this failure threshold thought of beforehand, when the metric sinks to that level, at that time, you know that this is a time when we have to come and decide, should we pivot or should we terminate? I'll give you an example, right? I ask everyone, hey, what's your success criteria? We have 1 million user coming in, and if 100 people, buy the subscription, I'm happy. That's my success metric. So, okay, sounds fair. What if 99 do it? Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy. What if 80 do it? Okay. What if 70 do it? Okay, still, okay. What if 60 do it? No, something is wrong. I need to go figure out things. Okay, so what if 30 do? No, that's too low. What if 20 do? I'll lose my job. That is the failure threshold, right? And it needs to be very clear in the beginning, because when things start going wrong, there's a phrase, right? When something starts going wrong, then everything starts going wrong. And when your metrics are not performing, you're under that stress, then things happen. Random suggestions come. Try this, try that. Random decision making happens. Politics happens. A lot of not so smart kind of conversations happen. So it's very important to call out the failure threshold and have an understanding that when we reach here, what are the kind of questions we will ask so we can figure out. The other objection. So one objection I've heard is, hey, I don't want to think about that. As if not thinking about failure is the best way to avoid failure, right? But the leaving that aside, the other one I have, kind of objection I've heard towards calling this out. Then what people will try to do, just do just the sufficient to stay about the failure metric, and see, that's that red mentality. But that happens is when you are looking at 200 metrics and you're seeking where are the red in the rag status, where are the red and ambers, and I'll ignore the green. But if you have a limited set, and if someone is hovering just above, that will still be very visible, and you can figure that out. You can hold those conversations, right? So that becomes very important. Finally, it's always good to talk about metrics. It's always good to talk about, following that metrics, but it's very important to know what to do if a metric is going wrong, right? No knee-jerk reactions, no politics, no blame games. If from the beginning you have some kind of remediation plan on how to handle each metric going bad. And I think at some point, Sachin, maybe there is a consulting asset, an asset that you and I have built for ThoughtWorks called ThoughtWorks Polaris. And in some way, it captures a lot of these, and maybe we should talk about that at some point. And
yes, we should.
leave it up to users. I don't want to just promote what we have built, but that's a thing. And there are a lot of tools, open source tools and commercial products that you can use to do all of this. I don't know how many of them have remediation, plans though, but it's very important to have all of these. And what I also want to do is there are, I'll probably share it in the description also. There are some one blog that you wrote, Sachin, on ThoughtWorks Insight, and one blog that I wrote on ThoughtWorks Insight. But these are all public information, so it's not that, you cannot go and access it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And thus, to quick recap, Sachin, EEBO metrics are a set of metrics that talk about engineering excellence and create a line of sight to the business outcomes. There is a limited set of metrics. We have a strong opinion on what those metrics should be. And we have an opinion, we have shared that. And we also have an opinion on how to use these metrics, how not to use these metrics. And when you start using these, what should be your first approach? What are those sensible defaults? So I'm hoping that, this is of use. It's kind of culmination of a lot of things that we have been talking, and would love to hear feedback from other people on how they have used these, or if they have some other set of similar metrics that they have used in similar circumstances or for the similar outcome.
Absolutely. I think this was fantastic, Dinkar. I loved it, and the site looks fantastic, by the way. So would love to hear feedback on that.
It's a free template that I just updated over a weekend. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like that's the joy of internet nowadays, right? So, but yeah, it looks fantastic. Let us know about the feedback on EEBO Metrics. Visit the site. And if you have any points to talk about, we'd be happy to answer that.
Sure. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Sachin. Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye.